When my parents passed away, I thought I'd at least inherit a piece of the life they had built. They had everything: a sprawling estate in Beverly Hills, luxury cars, investments, the works. But when the lawyer read their will, it was all for my sister, Evelyn. Every asset, every valuable item, every inch of property went to her. And me? I was handed a weathered cabin tucked away in Montana, looking like it hadn't been touched in decades. I felt blindsided. Evelyn sat in that sleek office wearing a tailored coat and hiding a smug smile, while I just stared at the lawyer, unable to speak. Millions of dollars and acres of prime real estate, and I was left with a crumbling cabin that smelled of mold and aged wood. I had been their son for 32 years, their flesh and blood, and this was my worth. Evelyn had always had it easy. The golden child. The one my parents bragged about at gatherings. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect life. They called her their pride and future, and me? I was the shadow. The kid who fixed broken things and spent summers alone in that same cabin. Even in death, they had made sure I knew I wasn't enough. Anger consumed me. The thought of Evelyn living in that mansion, entertaining guests in marble halls while I was left with rotting wood and cracked floors, made my blood boil. I gripped the cabin keys until my knuckles ached. I didn't want their token gift. I didn't want their reminder of my supposed worth. I decided then and there, I would drive to Montana and burn the cabin down. If this was all I was deemed worthy of, I'd turn it to ashes. But when I finally arrived, snow crunching under my boots and wind biting at my face, I stepped inside and froze. Amid the decay, something caught my eye. On the stone fireplace lay a letter, handwritten in my father's shaky script addressed to me. To Lucas, I hesitated, my anger faltering. That single letter stopped me cold. I had no idea that what I was about to read would shift everything I thought I knew about my family, my sister, and the inheritance I had been ready to destroy. Growing up, our family seemed flawless from the outside. My father, Daniel Hayes, was a renowned real estate developer, known not just for his acumen but for the authority he carried into any room. My mother, Margaret, was the perfect partner. Sharp-minded, graceful, and always supportive. Together, they created a life most people dreamed of. But beneath the perfection, cracks ran deep. Evelyn fit perfectly into their world. Polished, driven, effortlessly charming, she seemed destined for greatness. Teachers adored her. Neighbors admired her. My parents never missed an opportunity to praise her. "Evelyn, you're going to do extraordinary things," I heard over and over, while I faded into the background, invisible. I was different. I didn't belong in their world of handshakes and high-profile deals. I loved working with my hands, fixing things, building things, taking apart old engines and putting them back together. It gave me a sense of purpose. I felt alive outside, away from the constant hum and glare of the city. My happiest memories weren't in the Beverly Hills mansion. They were at the Montana cabin. I would run through the forest, fish in the clear streams, and sit by the fireplace listening to the wood crackle while the wind whispered outside. Sometimes my parents came along, but it was obvious they saw it as a brief escape from their glamorous life. For me, it was home. The only place I ever truly belonged. No matter how hard I tried, though, I never seemed to measure up. When Evelyn brought home straight A's, the report card was displayed on the fridge. When I spent weeks handcrafting a treehouse, they clapped politely and moved on. When she was accepted into a prestigious college, there was a celebration. When I chose to pursue carpentry locally, it was dismissed as a phase. Every achievement of mine felt small in comparison to hers. As we got older, the gap between us widened even more. Evelyn became the face of the family. Graceful, confident, always in the right circles, dressed like my father, speaking like him. I became the son who was explained away with a shrug, the one who didn't fit into their world, the one who preferred a quieter, simpler life. I tried to pretend it didn't bother me, but every day it cut deeper than the last. Then the accident happened. My parents were gone in an instant, taken in a rainy night car crash. The shock hit me harder than I imagined. Despite all the years of feeling overlooked, they were still my parents. Part of me hoped that losing them might somehow level the playing field between Evelyn and me, that grief would bring us together. But that hope died the day the will was read. I'll never forget that office, the scent of polished wood, the cold leather chairs, the lawyer's calm, measured voice. Line after line, the will was read, each word slicing through me. Evelyn inherited the Los Angeles mansion, my father's investments, my mother's jewelry, everything. When he turned to me, his voice softened. To Lucas Hayes, he said, "We leave the Montana cabin." The room went quiet. My heart pounded. That had to be a mistake. Money, property, even a car, surely there was more. But there wasn't, just the cabin. I looked at Evelyn. Her lips curved into that familiar victorious smile, the one she always wore when she came out ahead. "They must have known this suits you," she said smoothly. "You've always loved that cabin, Lucas. Maybe they thought it was perfect for you." Her words hit harder than anything the lawyer had said. I wanted to scream, to tell her I had spent my entire life fighting for the kind of approval she received effortlessly. Instead, I sat frozen, my hands trembling, a mix of humiliation and anger boiling inside me. I left the office feeling smaller than ever. Even in death, my parents had made it clear Evelyn mattered more. Evelyn was worthy. I was not. Anger festered inside me, growing with every thought of her walking through those marble halls, redecorating rooms I had played in as a child, hosting parties under the same roof where I had once sought their attention. And then there was the cabin, the decaying, isolated cabin in Montana. It felt like a cruel joke. I made a decision that day, one that seemed like the only way to take back some control over a life that had always favored Evelyn. If this cabin was all I was worth, then I would destroy it. I would drive to Montana, drench the floors with gasoline, and set it ablaze. I wouldn't let that decaying structure stand as a reminder of how little my parents valued me. That was the plan. The drive north felt endless. Snow hammered against the windshield and the wipers struggled to keep up. The heater roared uselessly as the cold seeped into every corner of the truck. Every mile gave me more time to replay the scene in my head, and with every repetition my anger grew. I pictured Evelyn lounging in the sprawling estate, sipping wine by the pool where we once had family barbecues, laughing with friends at the fortune she had inherited. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, vowing that the one thing they had given me like scraps would vanish. When I finally arrived, the sight of the cabin only fueled my rage. Snow sagged heavily on the roof. The porch leaned precariously and the wood had darkened with rot. The shutters banged against the windows in the biting wind. It looked abandoned, forgotten, exactly how I had felt my whole life. I stepped out, the cold slicing through my jacket, snow crunching under my boots. My breath formed sharp clouds, and for a moment I just stared at the place I had once loved. Memories came unbidden. My father showing me how to split firewood, my mother humming while cooking over the old stove, afternoons spent on the porch with a fishing pole too tall for me. Those memories should have warmed me, but instead they left me hollow. If any of it had truly mattered, Why had my parents given everything else to Evelyn and left me this? I shook the thoughts aside and went to work. In the back of my truck were 2 cans of gasoline and a box of matches. My plan was simple: soak the floors, strike a match, watch the cabin burn, and reclaim control over a life that had always diminished me. I carried the cans up the groaning steps. The front door resisted before giving way with a sharp crack. Inside, the air was colder than outside, thick with dust and the scent of damp wood. The fireplace sat lifeless, covered in soot and cobwebs. I set the cans down and imagined the flames climbing the walls, the roof collapsing, the insult finally erased. Then something caught my eye. On the stone mantel taped above the fireplace was an envelope. The edges were yellowed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My father's, bold and slightly uneven. Across the front were the words, "To Lucas." I froze. My hands, inches from the gasoline, dropped to my sides. My chest tightened as 1,000 thoughts ran through me. Was it a final apology? Another insult? Instructions for fixing a leaky roof? My father was a man of few words, and the thought that he had left something behind for me alone twisted my stomach with confusion. I stepped closer and peeled the envelope from the stone. The tape cracked as I freed it. For a long moment I just held it, feeling its weight in my hands, unsure of what I was about to uncover. My father had written this for me. Not for Evelyn, not for both of us, just for me. The same parents who had left me what I thought was nothing had, in truth, left something hidden in the place I had been ready to destroy. I slid my finger under the flap and tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, carefully folded. The handwriting was shaky, but the words were unmistakable. "Lucas," it began. I sank into the dust-covered chair by the cold fireplace and read. He wrote about how different Evelyn and I had always been. She belonged to the world of business, society, and public life. I belonged to quiet places, to the woods, the land, to spaces most people ignored. He explained that the mansion and all its wealth had been hers because she could handle it, because she was prepared for the life it demanded. But he had reserved something far greater for me. The letter contained directions. Behind the cabin, he wrote, there was a narrow trail winding into the forest. 1/2 mile in, an oak tree marked by a deep scar across its bark would stand. Beneath it, he promised, I would find the true inheritance meant for me alone. This is what I intended for you, Lucas. Trust me. You will understand. By the time I finished reading, my hands were trembling. The gasoline can sat untouched by the door, the matchbox still in my pocket. The fire I had been ready to ignite no longer made sense. A different fire had been sparked within me instead, one fueled by curiosity, by confusion, by the pull of a secret my father had left just for me. I looked out the back door at the snow-covered forest. My father wanted me to find something here, something meant only for me. I placed the letter on the mantel, tightened my coat, and stepped back into the cold. It bit harder than before, but I ignored it. Leaning against the shed, I found an old shovel, rusted and worn, but solid enough. Flashlight in one hand, shovel in the other, I set off toward the path. Every crunch of snow under my boots echoed through the silence. My breath puffed in sharp clouds, my mind racing with questions. What had he buried? Why had it been hidden from Evelyn? Why had he waited until now to tell me? The path was darker than I remembered. Cold gnawed through my gloves, but I pressed on, the words from the letter repeating in my mind. 1/2 mile in, as he had said, I found the oak tree. Its bark was thick and deeply scarred, the wound weathered over years. I drove the shovel into the frozen ground and began to dig. Ice and hard soil fought back, each strike sending shocks through my arms. My breath grew ragged. gloves damp with sweat, but I didn't stop. Whatever was buried here was meant for me, and I would not let it remain hidden. The first strike of metal on frozen earth rang sharply in the silent forest. The blade bounced, jarring my arms. But I forced myself to dig deeper. The soil resisted, locked in frost, threatening to break me before it would yield. Yet I continued. Strike after strike, driven by the fire my father's words had lit inside me. A fire no snow, no ice, no lingering doubt could extinguish. My breath came in sharp, heavy bursts, white clouds forming in the dark air around me. The flashlight balanced on a branch, casting a weak circle of light over the tree roots. Each swing of the shovel made shadows stretch and twist, turning the forest into something alive, almost watching me. Doubts gnawed at me with every strike. Anger still simmered inside. What if this was some final trick? Another way my father reminded me I was different, never enough. But alongside that doubt, a strange determination grew. This was meant for me, not Evelyn. Me hours seemed to pass as I dug, the frozen soil resisting every strike. Finally, the shovel broke through the top layer, hitting softer earth beneath. That small victory sent adrenaline surging through me. I dug faster, gloves damp with sweat, shoulders screaming with effort. The sound of metal against roots and rock echoed in the woods, but I didn't stop. My father's words played in my mind. What you will discover there is yours alone. This is what I meant for you to have. For the first time in years, I felt him speaking directly to me. Not to Evelyn, not to appearances, but to me. Then the shovel struck something solid. The clang was metallic, hollow, different from the dull thud of rock or the snap of roots. My heart leapt. I dropped to my knees and scraped away the dirt with my hands, fingers meeting something cold and hard. Beneath layers of soil and tangled roots, the edge of a metal chest emerged. My pulse quickened as I clawed the earth away, revealing the chest inch by inch. Old, heavy, reinforced with iron bands, its surface rusted but intact, it sat waiting for me. I hooked my hands under its edges and tried to lift it, but it refused to budge. Grabbing the shovel again, I cleared the surrounding soil until I could finally drag it to the surface. Snow crunched under me as I sank back, gasping, staring at the chest that had been buried here all this time. My hands trembled as I reached for the latch. Thoughts of Evelyn lounging in her Los Angeles estate flashed through my mind, confident she had won everything. Thoughts of the years I'd spent wondering if my father had ever truly seen me, and now here I was staring at a chest in the Montana woods left for me alone. The latch creaked as I opened it. Inside were bundles of papers wrapped in oilcloth, carefully preserved against the elements. I pulled one free and unwrapped it, hands shaking. It was a journal, filled with my father's handwriting. I flipped through the pages, reading about the land, about his choice to purchase the thousands of acres surrounding the cabin, and about his hopes for its future, and about me. You were always most alive here, one page read. This land matches your spirit. It needs someone who will love it as it is, not carve it up for profit. That someone has always been you. Tears stung my eyes. My father had known me, truly known me. The cabin had never been an insult. It had been the doorway to this, my inheritance, my purpose, my place in the world. I dug deeper into the chest, uncovering maps, legal papers, and finally a deed. My name was written boldly across it. The land, the cabin, the woods, the surrounding acres was all mine. It wasn't just an abandoned shack hidden in the wilderness. It was the heart of a legacy my father had carefully preserved for me alone. The realization hit me with force. Evelyn had inherited the mansion and fortune, but I had something different, something greater, something alive. My parents had not forgotten me. They had trusted me. I sat in the snow, the journal open on my lap, the chest heavy with the weight of my father's words. For the first time since reading the will, I didn't feel like the overlooked son. I felt chosen. The anger that had carried me here began to fade, replaced by something steadier, something deeper, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of responsibility. Around me the land stretched in silent snow, waiting for me to decide what came next. I closed the chest, gripped the shovel, and stood. The night air was sharp but no longer hostile. My father had led me here with his letter, and I had followed. Now I understood why. I glanced back at the cabin through the trees. The plan to burn it down was gone. In its place was a new plan, one I hadn't anticipated. I would rebuild, restore, honor what my father had left me. Not from anger, but from love. Kneeling beside the oak tree that night, I crossed a line I could never undo. My life had shifted. My inheritance was no longer a burden. It was a calling. The chest was heavier than I imagined. Dragging it back toward the cabin felt like carrying the weight of my entire childhood through the snow. My arms ached, my legs trembled, but I refused to stop. By the time I reached the porch, I was soaked in sweat beneath my coat, gloves stiff with cold. I kicked the door open with my boot and hauled the chest inside, setting it down in front of the fireplace. For a long moment I just stared. The flashlight flickered across the iron bands holding the chest together. Buried for years, maybe decades, it had waited for me. The gasoline can still sat near the door, a silent reminder of the plan I had abandoned. I almost laughed at how close I had come to destroying this place, the very place that held the truth. I knelt and opened the chest again. Bundles of papers wrapped in oilcloth were carefully preserved. I lifted one and unwrapped it with trembling hands. My father's journals spilled onto the floor. Their cracked leather cover spoke of time and care. I opened one at random. The first entries detailed how he had quietly bought the land piece by piece without telling anyone. He wrote about falling in love with the wilderness, how it reminded him of his own childhood far from the city. He wrote of wanting to preserve something untouched, something real in a world always chasing wealth. Turning the page, I froze. Taped inside was a photograph of me as a boy, sitting on the porch of this very cabin holding a fishing pole far too big for my small hands. Beneath it, my father had written, "Lucas at his happiest. This is where he belongs." I set the journal down, my eyes burning, unable to continue reading. But for the first time I knew. I belonged here. All those years I had believed my father never saw me, that he only valued Evelyn and her polished successes. And yet, here was proof that he had. He had been watching me all along. Not just watching, but understanding me in ways I never imagined. I picked up another bundle. Maps this time, carefully drawn, marking the boundaries of thousands of acres of wilderness surrounding the cabin. Hills, forests, streams, all meticulously documented. At the bottom of one map was a note in my father's hand. Land to remain whole for Lucas. Next came the deed. My name was printed clearly, legally binding with signatures and seals. My father had transferred everything to me long before his death. The land was mine. It was worth more than the Los Angeles estate, maybe even double. But that wasn't what shook me. It was what the land represented. It wasn't wealth to flaunt or sell. It was a legacy, a responsibility, and he had trusted me with it. Beneath the documents, I found more journals. These were different. They weren't about land or money. They were about me. Page after page he wrote about our time at the cabin. The first fish I caught alone, the fire I built without help, the hours I disappeared into the woods and returned with stories of hidden trails. He wrote that I had never seemed happier than when I was here. "You were not made for city lights," one entry read. "You were born for open skies and quiet mornings. This place is your inheritance because it is who you are." I pressed my hand to the page, chest tightening. For years I had carried anger like a stone, believing I was unloved, unwanted, and overlooked. Now I realized how wrong I had been. My father had not overlooked me. He had understood me better than anyone ever could. Tears blurred my vision as I thought of Evelyn in her mansion, living in luxury, while I sat here, surrounded by snow and silence, holding my father's words. For the first time, I didn't feel cheated. I felt chosen. There was one more envelope tucked beneath the journals. I opened it carefully. Inside was a short note in his hand. "Lucas, if you are reading this, then you have found what I left for you. I know you were angry at me in life, and I do not blame you. I did not always say the right things, and I know I let you feel forgotten. But you were never forgotten. This land is yours because you are the only one I trust to protect it. Use it well. Make it your own. And know that I have always been proud of you." I read it again, then again until the words blurred. My body shook under the weight of it all. The anger I had carried since the will was read drained away, replaced by something steadier. Gratitude. Peace. I leaned back against the fireplace and closed my eyes. I thought of how close I had come to striking a match, to destroying this place. Instead, I had uncovered the truth. My father had not left me nothing. He had left me everything that truly mattered. The cabin, once a symbol of neglect, no longer felt like decay. Even with its sagging roof and drafty walls, it felt alive. The chest of journals and documents sat by the fireplace, and I found myself returning to it night after night, lighting a fire, settling into the chair and reading my father's words. The journals were more than instructions about the land. They were a bridge to him, to who I was meant to be, and to the life waiting for me. The journals were glimpses into my father's heart. He wrote of his hopes, his mistakes, and the love he had never spoken aloud. I began to see my parents in a new light. My mother's presence echoed in his words too. Small notes about her humming while I wandered the woods or worrying I might stray too far, yet always smiling when I returned with stories. For years I had believed they valued Evelyn more than me. Now I saw that while they loved us differently, it was never unequal. The anger that had consumed me vanished. In its place came purpose. I no longer saw the cabin as a burden, but as the center of something far larger. Each morning, waking to the snow drifting through the trees, I felt entrusted, not cheated. I began repairing the cabin slowly. At first it was simple work, patching leaks, fixing broken steps, sealing cracks in the walls. But over the weeks, I realized the labor was more than physical. Each nail hammered, each board replaced, felt like stitching together pieces of myself. The boy who had spent hours fishing, building fires, and exploring the woods was still here. My father had not only given me land, he had given me back a part of me I didn't know I had lost. I thought often of Evelyn. I wondered if she would ever understand why our parents had made the choices they did. She had the mansion, the fortune, the life of wealth and status, but what I had been given could not be measured in dollars. It was measured in acres of untouched wilderness, in the quiet wind through the trees, in the trust my father had left behind. I no longer felt the need to prove anything to her. For the first time I was content knowing I had exactly what had been meant for me. The greatest lesson I learned was simple. Inheritance is not always about money. Sometimes it's about being given what fits your soul even when it doesn't look like wealth. My parents had seen me clearly even when I thought they had not. By choosing differently for me, they had given me more than material wealth. They had given me meaning. One evening, sitting by the fire and flipping through a journal that described the oak tree where I had unearthed the chest, I understood my life would never be the same. The cabin was no longer a symbol of neglect. It had become a home, a place to build, a place to protect. The land around it would remain whole, as my father had wanted, and I would be its guardian. I was not the forgotten son. I was the son they trusted, and that trust would guide me for the rest of my life.